Which could have many consequences for the UK and particularly Londoners. A yes vote in the referendum would mean a splitting of the 300-year union of England and Scotland. And last night, the Evening Standard held a debate on Scottish independence and what it might mean for London.
We're holding this debate here tonight because London actually matters in all this. Somehow you think it's all about Scotland. About 250,000 Scots in London. And actually, as a gentleman in the queue reminded me when I made that point, you know, there are also a lot of non-Scots in London who don't have a vote but would like a voice.
I feel actually quite removed from the debate. It's very widespread in Scotland, but down here, you know, I'm only partially aware of it, so this is an opportunity to hear both sides because I have a vote. I haven't made up my mind yet.
I think that generally people are fed up with the power base being so far away and really representing people from the south east of England that have got a very different standard of living and very different priorities to people in Scotland, and really they want the control to be able to decide that for themselves.
How would a yes vote affect London, and why should Londoners care about it?
I think I love London, to be clear. I've lived here half my life. It's a great city. It's the world's greatest city. But London has sucked the life out of the entire UK. There is a preponderance of institutions and resources in London. And it's become a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. And other parts of England have missed out. Places like Birmingham, Newcastle, Liverpool, Manchester have not had the regeneration they deserve because so much has been concentrated in London. So London, unfortunately, will remain unaffected by global change, as London has remained unaffected by the credit crunch. There are still multi-million-pound houses being sold here. Business continues as normal here. This is not even a speck of dust in the eye of London, what happens in Scotland. And that's really why we need to make a change, because that's how irrelevant and how overlooked Scotland is in London.
Well, a lot of the key economic relationships that affect London and affect Scotland are between the two places. Scotland is, for example, Edinburgh is the second most important financial centre in London, in the UK after London. Being part of the UK is important to both places. We know that, for example, independence would damage trade between Scotland and the rest of the UK. That uncertainty would be difficult for everybody to manage, and to the extent that independence undermines Scotland's economy, that also has a knock-on effect on London.
So this does affect London. We've been talking to some of the panellists who say, you know, that if it starts with Scotland, you've really introduced a volatility throughout. So why doesn't London think about going independent, in which case? You know, would the north of England start to look to Scotland? What if we come out of Europe but Scotland stays in, and so on? It could look a completely different country. And of course London as the capital city, which would be under threat in some way, you know, this is really, really very, very important to us.
So here with me to discuss Scottish independence and what it might mean for London are Vicky Price. Now, she's the Chief Economic Advisor at the Centre for Economics and Business Research. Michelle Thompson, Managing Director of pro-independence organisation Business for Scotland. And South London poet and playwright Robert Somini, who's part of the National Collective, a movement of artists and creatives for Scottish independence. So Vicky, do Scotland and London need each other? Many people would ask, what's it got to do with us?
The interesting thing is that the rest of the UK needs London anyway. London, of course, is the expanding part of the whole country. That's not a negative thing. It's actually quite positive, because a lot of money leaves London and actually goes to subsidise what goes on elsewhere around the country. Now, Scotland is slightly different because, of course, they do produce an awful lot of oil and gas. And we have lots of benefits from that. So basically the transfer is pretty neutral between London and Scotland. But nevertheless, a strong UK, which links in Scotland as much as it possibly can, a strong London is what I mean, which links up with Scotland, and therefore means a strong UK overall, is really what we all want to see.
So, Michelle, this is a very valid point Vicky's making here. The fact a lot of money actually comes out to London and goes to Scotland, and you could risk losing that money. Is that something that you've taken into consideration in your desire to break away from the UK?
That's a misconception, actually. Scotland raises more money per head of population than the rest of the UK, and it has done consistently for every year of the last 33 years. If you just took a snapshot of the last 5 years, that would have been £8.5 billion more for Scotland to spend or save as it saw fit. So it's actually a fallacy. It's the completely other way around. We know that oil and gas is a very strong sector for Scotland. It's got many onshore strong sectors as well, and it's a very robust and dynamic economy. So I would throw that back at you. It's not actually the case, and it's not commonly understood.
I mean, do you not worry about the idea, and this is indeed from Vicky's research group, they're saying that you could potentially lose a lot of jobs, between 20 to 40,000 people could leave. And one of the places they could come to is London, where they feel they're going to find jobs, and that's currently what's happening now. Are you not worried about that?
The complete opposite is the case. And what we have seen is London, of course, is in reality a city-state. It's a magnificent city. It will continue to be a magnificent city. But what's tended to happen is that economic policies have been framed to favour London, the South East, particularly the City of London. The move for Scottish independence is all about taking control of fiscal levers, and part of that is job creation. We have massive unemployment. We have massive areas of Scotland that just don't have the wealth that you see in London, and taking control of these levers means that we can put in place economic policies to create jobs, not to lose jobs.
I mean, Robert, we had this debate yesterday evening, the Evening Standard ran a debate, and what was so interesting was the fact that lots of Londoners, non-Scottish Londoners took part, and just looking at yourself and talking to you, I wonder, why is this of interest to you?
Well, I know people are certainly concerned about the economy, but for me this is about democracy, and it's also about culture. Now, we have a situation where we live in a state which is very centralised, where power is in the hands of a few people, and that's not only economical, that's also cultural. And what I've been seeing going up to Scotland, meeting friends and talking to people, having meetings, is that people for the first time are saying that they want a different way to organise a society and a different way to express themselves. It's not so much only about independence and separation, really. It's actually about the terms on what that independence is based on. And that's where you get the cultural arguments of grassroots campaigning, for example, like National Collective, which is about artists welcoming other people in to a consistent and continual dialogue about how we can have a fairer and more decent society.
But couldn't you have that with just greater devolved powers? Can you also just get the same sort of identity, cultural identity, and yet still be part of the UK?
There's two reasons why I doubt this. First of all, at the start of this debate, I was very much ex-member of the Labour Party, very much a unionist. But I'm quite disillusioned with the way that the campaign's been run from the no side. It's been very negative, but also, for me, it's about the way that we can express ourselves. If you consider the way that people have been talking on the no side, it's been very, very negative. People on the yes side have been talking about new ways in order to build new institutions. And that's why I don't think that this old-tied idea of federalism can really work, because really, how can you honestly trust people who hold all the power to devolve power down? Really, it's about people at the bottom taking power back.
I mean, Vicky, I'm going to go back to the warning that potentially Scotland could lose tens of thousands of jobs if they do go away and break away. If that's the case, could that put more pressure on London if people are heading down here, more pressure on housing, jobs, that sort of thing?
That's always an issue, of course, but of course there's so many people who move into London on a continuous basis, so probably the difference is going to be that great. But what will make a difference is the types of businesses that might move over here, because what you're already seeing is a number of financial institutions saying, actually, we're going to move our headquarters south of the border just to be on the safe side, because we want to be able to have access to the market in the rest of the UK. Because the interesting thing is, of course, there's so much debate now about, are we going to have a currency union? I mean, how exactly is the whole issue of whatever debt may remain, going to be handled? All these things create a huge amount of uncertainty for businesses who are going to be looking for somewhere safe to go to. So we're already seeing that beginning to happen.
Michelle, very good point. We've already had Standard Life say that, look, if you guys break away, Scotland breaks away, they might also exit Scotland as well.
They didn't say that. I'm very fortunate. I worked for them for 18 years, and what exactly they said was they were presenting the results to the London Stock Exchange. They'll do something called a SWOT analysis, so look at strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats, and declare them, call them out. And that's all they were doing. What they said was that they may consider setting up companies for some of their back office functions, and it really was dependent on that clarity, particularly around a currency union. So they were very clear, and I have endless memos where they say, no, we're not saying that at all. Aberdeen Asset Management, for example, said, well, we already trade in 32 countries, 33 countries isn't going to make any difference. And part of the picture as well is what companies will then become headquartered in Scotland, because it's all about being next to the seat of power. For example, Diageo, main product line is whisky, and yet it's headquartered in London because that's where the control base is. I could see a company like them then being headquartered in Scotland, because that's where the control base will be. So equally well, you will see companies moving to Scotland, particularly if you've got a very benign tax environment, for example, a decrease in corporation tax.
I mean, so what you're saying is that you want to take business out of London and into Scotland?
What I'm saying is that there's plenty here for everybody. London is a wonderful city and it will continue to be. Scotland can do so much more if it has control over the money it raises in Scotland to put in place economic policies that favour Scotland. It's not a competition. It's not us versus them. This is not about identity. It's not about nationality. It's about putting in place economic policies that will favour Scotland, and we can do that if we're independent. We can't do it under devolution.
Is that fair? It's not just about identity and culture.
I think it is about culture. It's not necessarily about a narrow sense of identity. What I've been struck about when I've gone up to Scotland is how open it is, how welcoming the debate from the pro-independence side is. You asked me before about could we hope for a federal Britain and that kind of federal dream. Well, I can't really see that to be something that we could desire or even hope for when we have a situation where the government pays for vans to drive around with a particularly hostile anti-immigration message. When we have a Westminster policy, a Westminster culture that fosters hostility towards members of the Muslim community all over Britain. In Scotland, the debate is moving forward, moving away from that. It's saying that, yes, we are going to have a national identity, which is based on democracy, it's based on inclusion, and it's going to be backed up by action, not just hypocrisy. Not saying that we're in favour of equality and freedom and doing something else, but actually enforcing it through laws and through the way we act and treat each other as well.
I mean, Vicky and Michelle's raising some interesting points in terms of the fact there are businesses in London which could definitely be based in Scotland, and then you also have the situation where in London could perhaps be seen as too powerful, too much money is in London. It's not spread around across the country and across the UK the way other Western countries are, say, for America. In London, in England, you've just got London, in the UK, you've just got London, America, you've got New York, you've got LA, and that just doesn't exist in the UK in the same way. Is this not a way for Scotland to deal with that?
I think it's a fair point. I think it is true that by comparison to many other countries, we have one very big centre, whereas in many other places we have some cities which are not equivalent in size. Sometimes they are actually, and they're doing different things and specialise different areas, but they're quite important for the regions. Now, we do have a number of places. I mean, if you look at Birmingham, Manchester, for example, and of course, if you look at Scotland, which are well known, they have had a lot of regeneration which actually took place. I mean, look at what's been going on in Liverpool, for example, which has been completely revolutionised. So you can't say that the effort hasn't been made. Of course, it could have been done a lot better. Connections aren't particularly good and all that sort of stuff, which, of course, there are plans to improve on. It's not going to be perfect. But you can't restructure a country the size of the UK overnight and suddenly have these very big areas. But there's no doubt that there are special strengths and characteristics of Scotland that Scotland can really build on. But there's no reason why it can't build on those as part of the UK, and it needs to necessarily be independent to do so.
All right, then, well, look, Scottish independence is all on our poll of today, and we're asking you whether an independent Scotland would be good or bad for London. Let's just take a look at the results so far. Right now, so far, 44% of you say an independent Scotland would be good, whereas 56% of you actually say it would be bad. Now, Robert, these figures, it's not overwhelming either way.
I think people on both sides of the border are not really sure what an independent Scotland would mean for anyone. And I think if we look at the way the mainstream media has presented it to people south of the border, it has been almost a case of it's separation, it's hostilities because they hate you, and it's got nothing to do with that. I would say, talk to so many people who are involved on many different parts of the Yes campaign, whether it is National Collective, or whether it is the many different media sources that have popped up there. It's all about that dialogue and conversation. So that's completely understandable why it's that situation, why people are split.
I mean, Michelle, you're part of this campaign. Could you have campaigned better? Is there a reason why perhaps we're not as informed as we could be about this?
Well, I think London is just starting to come to the debate now, and of course it's quite telling that the reason they're getting so involved is as the polls continue to narrow and a yes vote looks much, much more likely, suddenly people are thinking, oh gosh, what might it mean for us? And actually it's a healthy debate because the centralisation of power in Westminster, yeah, that's fantastic for London, but there are other areas of the rest of the UK that have also struggled. Scotland has an opportunity to do things differently. And so I think we are going to seize that opportunity. And just to pick up on something around devolution, let's be very clear, under the Labour Party proposals for continued devolution, we worked out in Business for Scotland it would take a further 170 years for Scotland to get to full fiscal autonomy based on the rate of devolution so far. We cannot wait 170 years to get 1 in 5 children out of child poverty. So we're going to seize this opportunity to make a difference.
Okay, and just lastly, I'll leave it with you, in terms of potentially why Londoners don't know enough on what exactly the influence and consequence, rather, of Scotland breaking away from the UK could mean. Why do you think
Well,
that
there are loads of industries that depend on us being a sort of big country, a gateway into Europe and so on. So having the ability for companies to go anywhere in the UK, wherever they want to, but still be supported, if you like, by, let's say, the financial services, which are inevitably going to be moving even further to London if Scotland moves, and being able then to use the entire workforce and the skills of this country that are very, very strong in Scotland too, of course, look at the universities and so on, is a great, great plus for the UK as a whole and for London too. So I think for us, we would lose most definitely that ability, but overall I think Scotland probably would lose more.
Listen, Vicky and Michelle and Robert, thanks so much for joining us today. And that poll will be running throughout the day, so make sure you have your say. Just go to our website, londonlive.co.uk, and why not share your views on our Facebook page, and also you can leave us a message on our Twitter account using #HeadlineLondon. Right, now we're taking a